Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, pretty tough week in the NBA as legend, not just Celtics legend, but icon of the sport and icon of the sporting world. Bill Russell passed away peacefully at his home at the age of 88. We could do shows for the next year talking about Bill Russell as a man, his impact on the game, his impact on the civil rights movement. But, you know, I almost feel like what more is there to possibly be said about somebody that, you know, left such a huge impact in their 88 years?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Bill Russell, obviously, is more than just on the court. I mean, and his accomplishments on the court are second to none. The winning, the influence he had on the franchise, the league. But off the court, obviously, we know what he meant for the civil rights movement in the 60s when it wasn't necessarily popular. You know, there was him, Jim Brown, then Lou Alcindor, then Cassius Clay. They were at the forefront of the movement, along with Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who, you know, of course, raised their fists in unity at the 68 Summer Olympic Games in Mexico City. So we know what Bill Russell stood for on and off the court, and then winning 11 championships in 13 years. Here in the city of Boston, and he was obviously never loved by the city of Boston. Very complicated relationship. And to this day, there's one statue of Bill Russell in the city of Boston, and it's at City Hall Plaza, kind of alongside City Hall, where you kind of walk towards Faneuil Hall. I mean, it's kind of hidden. And I've always kind of pushed back on it. Like, why not have it on Causeway Street in front of TD Garden, where there's a statue of Bobby Orr? And I get that the Bruins own TD Garden, but man, for what Bill Russell meant to this city, please put a statue of him up near TD Garden. Maybe change the name of Causeway Street to Russell Way. I mean, David Ortiz has a bridge, a street named after him. Ted Williams has a tunnel named after him. I mean, Bill Russell certainly deserves more than that. But 88 years old and still, you know, was real active up until the NBA Finals, wishing the Celtics the best of luck. He was still socially active, and you know, it's still jarring when someone passes away, even though they're 88 years old. And to describe him as a legend and an icon is apropos, because you can't just say Basketball Hall of Famer Bill Russell. That doesn't measure up to what he meant on and off the court. So may he rest in peace. A truly great man, and obviously a great basketball player.
Sure. And also, I mean, one of the greatest athletes I think this country has ever seen. You know, a lot of stories coming out now after he's passed away about what just like an unbelievable athlete he was. And, you know, not take aside basketball, but his track and field accomplishments, and somebody who was really just so gifted, almost ahead of their time in terms of the things he was able to accomplish athletically and the high jump and how fast he was for his height. You know, had it been a different day and age, we'd be talking about somebody who, you know, was probably, you know, winning Olympic medals in multiple sports. He was that gifted. But yeah, I mean, that's how the way Bill Russell lived his life, Sap. And I had like a 12 chain tweet on this because I saw that. I had a lot of stuff to say, but that's how you maximize your celebrity to the best of your ability is what Bill Russell did. Essentially parlaying his fame to try to make other people's lives better. And there's a lot of people in the camp of, you know, shut up and dribble. And then there's some people in the, you know, remove sports and politics. And then there's other people like you and me who applaud athletes who they speak out. But I can't remember anybody, you know, with the exception of the guys you mentioned, Sap, Muhammad Ali, Kareem, and you know, Jackie Robinson too, that parlayed their fame and their success as an athlete in towards trying to make the lives of people better, people that they cared about, people in their communities. And if you were to ask Bill Russell, I'm sure he said that he would say that was what he was most proud of. Obviously, the 11 championships, very proud of that. But his life as an activist, I think, is the same. And then the same, I think, if you ask Kareem, he would say the exact same thing. Muhammad Ali was still around. I'm sure he'd say the same thing. All those guys. But I think that's where Bill Russell's legacy will live on forever and ever. Of course, 11 championships, that's never going to be topped, but it's the parlaying his fame into trying to make people's lives better.
He marched with Martin Luther King. I mean, that says it all. And Martin Luther King wanted to call him up on stage to speak, and Bill Russell politely declined. He says, "I haven't earned that right yet." Just think about how self-aware Bill Russell was at that moment to say, this is still Martin Luther King, who is the leader of this movement, and I'm just here to be a servant to him. And I think that says so much about what Bill Russell was about. And he kind of did that type of thing on the court as well. He figured out ways to win games. He wasn't about statistics. He often said, why should I shoot so much when I've got Sam Jones or Tommy Heinsohn or John Havlicek, all great shooters? Why have me shoot when they're better shooters than me? My job will be to run to the rim and try to draw defenders there. I'm going to be a great defender. I'm also going to not block shots into the stands. That might, be something that gets oohs and ahs from the stands, but it doesn't really help us because the other team still has possession of the basketball. I'm going to be a great defensive player. I'm going to rebound. I'm going to set picks. I'm going to be a leader, the ultimate leader. And then in his final 3 years, he served as player coach of the Celtics and won 2 more titles. So, I mean, we're talking about someone who just understood what it took to win, to lead in very difficult times. Again, he was never embraced by the city of Boston. Neither was Ted Williams, by the way. In the late 50s, you had Bill Russell winning championships and Ted Williams, who, often is referred to as the greatest hitter in the history of the sport, and neither was embraced by the city. I mean, right. Flash forward to David Ortiz and Tom Brady, who are revered in this city. So, a little bit different at that moment. And people hold it against Williams that he never won championships. Well, back then, one team represented the American League and one team represented the National League at the postseason. They met in the World Series. And Ted Williams happened to play at the same time that the Yankees had a dynasty that is still the greatest dynasty in the history of sports.
Yeah, and it's baseball. So,
it's baseball. Like right. You can't hold that against the great players. I mean, Barry Bonds never won a World Series. Willie Mays won one. Ken Griffey Jr. never played in a World Series. So, yeah, you can't hold that against those players. And again, if we're all about winning, why isn't Bill Russell always talked about as one of the 3 or 4 greatest players, which I think he is?
Yeah, agreed.
Bill Russell has 11 championships, which is as many as Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan combined. And yet everybody puts Jordan number 1. I have Jordan at 2, LeBron at 1, and I have Russell at 3 and Kareem at 4. That to me is the Mount Rushmore. But those are all minor things compared to the life that he lived, and may he rest in peace now that he's hopefully in a much better place.
And absolutely, if you're talking about his basketball accomplishments, they stack up against anybody. And 11 championships, like I said, Sap, that's never going to be touched. No one's going to approach that. It's an unbreakable record. And as far as you said, Sap, just the ultimate teammate. Like, he could have gone out and said, I'm going to take a lot of shots. I want to try to score 20, 25 a game. He never seemed to care about that. He cared about winning above all, and it paid off to the tune of the Celtics. And yeah, he absolutely, not only was he not embraced by the city when he played, he was outright reviled by some people, which is, a stain that still weighs heavy on the city of Boston. And I am grateful. Granted, I obviously was not even close to being a sperm when he was playing, but I am grateful as a lifelong Celtics fan that his relationship with the city and the team did get better over time. And by the time he died, I do think my generation, the current generations of fans, really embraced him, and he was more active with the team, especially once credit to this new ownership group, once they took over, and especially once Kevin Garnett came into town. He was very close with Kevin Garnett, and you saw him more around the team. And then obviously the statue, like you said, got built of him, long overdue and not necessarily as prominent as it should be. I agree with you on both those counts, Sap. But I do feel like there was a thawing of the relationship between him and the city of Boston, because you don't want to have somebody pass away who was such an icon and just have no sort of reconciliation at all. So I do feel like that relationship got better. The thing that bothered me the most, outside of being sad that Bill Russell passed away, Sap, was that too many people on social media used it as an opportunity to push their own agendas of different things. Boston was terrible. This person, Boston's a racist city. I saw somebody from the Boston Globe say, all you need to know about Boston is that they never called Bill Russell the GOAT and they called Tom Brady the GOAT. It's like, why? I just think it's gross to use somebody's death as an opportunity to push your own agenda, and regardless of who the person is. I think it's disgusting.
I saw that. And again, Bill Russell retired in 1969. No one ever used the term GOAT in 1969, other than if they were talking about the animal, right? I mean, GOAT's something that came about. I think Michael Jordan was the first athlete that we called the GOAT, greatest of all
maybe
time.
Even later. I don't know. It's not that old.
And it's really almost reserved for Tom Brady, which it fits. Tom Brady's the greatest of all time when we're talking about quarterbacks or football players, right? I think he's clearly the greatest quarterback of all time. And I think he and Jim Brown, that's the discussion of who the greatest football player is of all time. So we can call Tom Brady the GOAT, and that doesn't make us racist because we're not calling Bill Russell the GOAT. And again, that term gets thrown around so much, like greatest of all time. Bill Russell, greatest winner of all time, certainly fits. Greatest social justice warrior of all time, that certainly fits. Whether he's the greatest basketball player of all time, he's in the discussion. Yeah, so to say that, by Boston sports fans calling Tom Brady the GOAT shows that Boston is a racist city is ludicrous. Because again, people that followed and loved Bill Russell don't even use that term GOAT. That GOAT is reserved more for younger people. Young hip people like 59-year-old John Sapichetti here who likes to throw it around every night.
That was somebody who works for the Globe was saying that.
Right.
That's gross. On the day he died.
Yeah, it's like, let's not go there. Let's just respect the man and talk about all of his accomplishments. And don't even mention what he did on the basketball court. We all know that. Let's just talk about how much he stood for civil rights. That to me, when he had the summit meeting, I believe it was in 1967 with Jim Brown, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was still at UCLA. Just think about how
brave.
Far ahead.
That is so brave.
Because O.J. Simpson,
holy crap.
O.J. Simpson was at USC. And he was kind of asked, well, why didn't you attend? He goes, well, I'm O.J. Simpson. I'm not necessarily black. Because, O.J. Simpson was very vapid compared, obviously, to those great
think
men.
About doing that at 18 years old, 19 years old, however Lou Alcindor was before
far
he was
ahead of his time.
That is scary. And he had the balls to do that.
And they were all there to support Muhammad Ali. And again, Tommy Smith and John Carlos a year later in Mexico City. And Curt Flood challenged the reserve clause. And obviously, we know what Jackie Robinson did in 1947. And to me, the forefront of all of this was Jesse Owens at the Summer Olympic Games in 1936. We talk about big road wins. He won 4 gold medals in Munich with Adolf Hitler sitting there, giving him whatever, the evil eye or whatever, staring through him. And that man went into the most hostile of all territories and won 4 gold medals. I know, we could talk about athletes winning, Game 7 on the road. That's pretty cool. But what Jesse Owens did in 1936, to me, that's the greatest road victory in the history of humanity, let alone sports. So yeah, all of these great social justice warriors. And now we see the athletes today that are very, very active, but now it's cooler now today, and you can kind of brand it into their, building their brand. Whether it was Colin Kaepernick or LeBron or all these athletes, and that's great. There was a little gap in there where a lot of athletes didn't really get into this, like Michael Jordan. Tiger Woods was really never someone who weighed into this, and you can respect that. They just didn't feel it was in their purview. But obviously, when Bill Russell was doing this, we're talking about guys who were making a good living, obviously, but not the type of money as the athletes are today. Someone like Wilt Chamberlain never got involved in that because Wilt was different. Wilt was different than Bill Russell in more ways than one. Both the way they played the game and the way they were off the court, for sure. But when I heard the news, it was still jarring because we saw him on Twitter. He was active on Twitter. I remember 2 years ago, or actually about a year and a half ago, he was one of the first prominent older gentlemen that got the vaccine. He and Kareem were 2 guys, and I'm like, this is called leadership, right? He's making sure to try to get the black community out there to get the vaccine because they're very hesitant about that. So and like you referenced, Jet, when he would meet with Kevin Garnett, there's a famous interview with Kevin Garnett, who was one of the 25 greatest players in the history of the sport, and a guy who's not lacking for self-confidence, was in awe sitting across from Bill Russell. We know that I think Bill Russell's favorite current Celtic would probably be Jaylen Brown because Jaylen Brown's very socially active. And you can see Jaylen Brown just looking at Bill Russell when he met him as if to say, oh, my Lord, that's Bill Russell. I think he was that big of a human being.
Sure. I think like I said in this tweet thread too, when my dad would tell me, stories about Bill Russell when I was a kid, it almost didn't seem like a human. It seemed like a superhero, like somebody, because like, how the hell do you win 11 championships and still have the time to be a social justice advocate and do, all the guy did was win. It was freaking remarkable in every level. I mean, from Pee Wee to college to Olympics to, I mean, the guy just won. And so it's like, how could you not be in awe of him? I mean, it's that sort of stuff doesn't happen. That sort of like aura of winning and doing all these things off the court. Like by the time Bill Russell was 50 years old, he's already lived like 4 or 5 lifetimes,
right,
worth of accomplishments. So, I mean, a remarkable man. And I do see some calls from Magic Johnson, I think other NBA players, for Adam Silver in the league to do something akin to retiring Bill Russell's number 6 throughout the league. Some other honor. The NBA Finals trophy is already named after him. I'm all for retiring number 6 throughout the league. I don't necessarily think that should prohibit somebody from wearing 6 if they want to. I think you could do both. Have all the stands retire, a green 6, and still, if a player wants to wear 6 as a tribute to Bill Russell, that I think that's more than fine. I think that you could do both, right? In baseball, some players still wear 42. If I'm not
they were able to wear 42. I think Mo Vaughn wore 42.
Right, I remember Mo
Mariano
Vaughn
Rivera.
doing it. Right.
Mariano Rivera, but then once their careers ended, that no one else would wear 42 on the Red Sox or Yankees. And then on Jackie Robinson Day, everyone wears 42, especially,
right.
Now it was the 75th anniversary back in April. So, yeah, I mean, if they want to retire number 6, I'm all in favor of that. LeBron wears number 6 right now, so he can continue to wear 6. But when he retires, the Lakers would retire number 6. So I think that's the best way to do it. I'm all in favor of that. We've talked about before who could be, the next logo of the NBA. Right now it's Jerry West. And Jerry West is, always said, I don't deserve that. And if they want to move on from me as the logo, I'd be quite fine with that. I think we just leave well enough alone until Jerry West is no longer with us, which if you've seen Jerry West lately, he looks like he's going to outlive both you and I.
He's not going anywhere.
He and Sandy Koufax are in their early 80s and they look like they could still go play. Must be the good living in Southern California. Maybe that's it. But and maybe at some point Bill Russell becomes the logo. Obviously Jordan could be the logo. And knowing the way the NBA likes to market, maybe they'll just use the Jordan brand logo from Nike and kind of tie it all in together, which would be kind of, shallow to say the least, but we know the NBA would probably make a lot of money off of that, and that's what keeps the league going. But yeah, I mean, whatever they want to do for Mr. Russell, I'm all in favor of that. Retire number 6 throughout the league. Change Causeway Street to Russell Way. Let's name a prominent street after this great man. I mean, again, we have the Ted
Boston
Williams
should
tunnel,
do more.
without question. And David Ortiz has, bridges, streets, all sorts of things. Let's honor Bill Russell the way he deserves. Not just that statue at City Hall Plaza. Again, the first time I saw it, I was kind of really upset because it's like, why is it here? You have to. It's not even in the prominent area of Government Center or City Hall Plaza. It's off to the side where there was a wax museum and a Staples, and then there's stairs near there that you walk down to go across the street to go to Faneuil Hall. It's like, put it somewhere more prominent than that. I would say put it in front of TD Garden.
They could put it right next to the Red Auerbach statue too in
Faneuil Hall
Market.
Yeah, somewhere.
Considering how
there.
their relationship, we
Sure.
know Bill Russell wrote a wonderful book about it called Red and Me. So that would be apropos, I think, as well.
Yeah, anywhere, just somewhere more prominent. Name a street after him. Again, I'm sure that the Celtics, who do things the right way, will have a night of celebration for the great Bill Russell at some point this season.
Yeah, the Celtics will definitely do something. That they'll do something and they'll handle it well. But the city of Boston really should look into doing a apt tribute for Bill Russell because of everything he accomplished as a player and a man in this city. So I hope that happens, Sap. Though the wheels of government don't necessarily move fast, especially in Boston. Though when they wanted to get rid of Yawkey Way, they did act pretty quickly to replace that on Jersey Street. So they can move quickly when they want to. So, that was obviously the biggest headline in the NBA this week was, all the tributes pouring in for Bill Russell, universally every team every player virtually had something to say about it because that was the sort of impact he led. But there are more, current stories going on in the NBA too. Kevin Durant meeting with the ownership of the Brooklyn Nets in regards to his trade request. Joe Tsai and him reportedly met. We don't really know what the fallout is. Sap, do you have any sort of inclination as to how that meeting went?
Lord knows, right? I mean, it could be one of two things, that he demands the trade, doesn't just request the trade, or he just says, okay, we're all in. Let's run it back for 1 year. They've got Kyrie signed for 1 year. You got Ben Simmons. They made some decent moves in the offseason. Let's make a run at it. I mean, Joe Tsai has committed well over $300 million to Kevin Durant, right? I mean, he signed him for 3 years at about $40 million a year. He's already been paid that. And he's already extended him for 4 years at nearly $50 million a year. So do the math. Over $300 million, roughly $320 million for 7 years. And he missed the first year, and you knew he was going to miss the first year because of the Achilles injury in the 2019 finals. So it's going to be for 6 years, $320 million. So Joe Tsai has obviously committed a lot of dough to Kevin Durant. And if I'm Joe Tsai, he may be the owner in the league that is going to be the test balloon to stand up to the players and say, look, we've committed to you. You have to commit to us. We can't just sign you for 4 years. And because you wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day, that you come in and demand or request a trade. Let's go there. Again,
it's a great point. Every owner is looking at this right now, Sap, and rooting for Joseph.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and look, I always favor the players, but again, we talked about this in the past. I wrote a column on Full Press Coverage that there has to be some give and take here. You can't be all in favor of the players. It can't be 99-1 in favor of the players, because there's a new CBA coming up in 2 years. There's a new TV contract in 3 years, which, by the way, will total 10 years, $75 billion, which will net each team $250 million. I mean, the salaries are only going to go up and up and up. The NBA is doing quite fine. So again, pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. That's a famous statement from Mark Cuban. And I think the league has to be careful about that, because, too much of a good thing sometimes is not good. If I can come up with more cliches here, certainly give me a job, writing fortune cookies. But I think that's going to be a very important meeting, unless Durant just says, I want out of here. Or maybe he says trade Kyrie because I can't stand him anymore. I doubt that. I think they still have a good relationship. And then you go from there. If Durant's engaged with Kyrie and Ben Simmons and some of the nice pieces they added in the offseason, Royce O'Neal and TJ Warren to go with their team, maybe they make a run at it.
Yeah, no one seems to have any clue what's going on there in terms of their ceiling is incredibly high. We know that, but their floor is also incredibly low. We saw that they got swept out. The only team to get swept in the playoffs. So, I mean, if going to Vegas, that would be the last team I would put money on, because who the hell knows, what their win total is going to look like, what their postseason is going to look like if they make the postseason. I don't know. I think it's a fool's errand trying to predict what they're going to look like this year. But certainly, like I said, Sap, their ceiling is very, very high. They have the pieces to be a championship contender, but chemistry is important in the NBA. Health is important in the NBA. Focus is important in the NBA, and it just comes heightened in the playoffs. Should they have been swept by the Celtics? Were they that bad of a team? No, but they didn't have the mental fight in them. They seemed resigned to their fate after game one, where they lost at the buzzer, and they just kind of laid down after that.
Yeah, they certainly weren't engaged for the second half of the season. Injuries had a lot to do with that. Then they traded James Harden for Ben Simmons, who never played a moment for the Brooklyn Nets. Kyrie had a great game one against the Celtics and then kind of checked out after that. And Durant never looked himself in that series against the Celtics. But I think with the NBA, we see that teams can kind of turn the corner quickly if everyone's engaged and healthy and you fine tune the roster and, you're on your way. So it's going to be interesting to hear what the fallout is from that meeting between Kevin Durant and Joe Tsai and see where the Nets are going forward. Because right now everything's kind of just on hold in the NBA. If Durant demands a trade, well, now we're going to see the teams get involved to try to acquire him, and maybe Kyrie would be on the move. Who the hell knows? But everything is focused on Brooklyn, New York, because with Durant and Kyrie Irving, those are the two biggest stars that could move at some point, or they just stay there and run it back with the Nets.
Right. I think, the longer this goes, the more likely that is. I mean, that's not exactly, groundbreaking to say, but the more likely it is that they start the season in Brooklyn, the longer it goes. Again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But I've said now, I think for weeks, I think at least Durant starts the season with the Nets. It's looking increasingly likely that Kyrie might start the season with the Nets too. That doesn't mean that they won't be traded at some point during the season. As we saw, they pulled the trigger on a James Harden trade midway through the season. So their GM, Sean Marks, isn't afraid to make a move, though that did not pan out well for them, as Ben Simmons, as you mentioned, Seb, didn't play a second. God knows what his situation is right now. So, we'll have to see. But yeah, obviously the NBA has been in a holding pattern for a little while now with this Durant and Kyrie stuff. They'll probably remain to be in a holding pattern. We're also waiting to see what goes on with Donovan Mitchell in Utah. That seems much more likely to get done before the start of the season to me than a Durant trade. But we'll have to see. As far as somebody that we know is definitely staying put, Sap, Charles Barkley has broke off talks with LIV Golf, and he's going to stay at TNT and Turner Sports, much to our delight, because that would have been a real shame to see him just go over to LIV Golf and do golf commentary, although I'm sure he would be great at it. But, you and I are not huge golf fans. So
no,
the fact that he's staying with basketball, that makes me very happy, and that I can still continue to watch the NBA on TNT every night that they do that show and be able to laugh my ass off. I'm very happy about that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's where he fits, right? And I'm sure he put a price out, and if LIV accepted it, then he may have been on the move. But he makes $10 million a year from Turner Sports, about another $10 million a year in endorsements. Those endorsements would dry up quickly if he went to LIV, because no one wants to be tied into the Saudi government, the royal family, anything to do with them. So,
well, except for Trump, he does.
Except for Trump, yes, he had them at his golf course last week, and we all remember when he was president, he met with them, and there was some sort of gold thing that he was enamored with that he just couldn't take his eyes off, because the royal family is very ostentatious. We can agree on that. A little over the top, to say the least. I guess when you're worth $600 billion, you can be. So I think what's going to happen, Barkley stays at Turner. Maybe they up his salary. Have him do a little bit more or a little bit less, because Barkley's not exactly a guy who's into show prep. I mean, he kind of just goes off,
no show
which
prep.
Makes him great. Which makes him
yeah.
great. Whereas with golf, I think they'd at some point have to do some prep, and the tournament is 3 days long. And is he going to travel to all these sites? I mean, he essentially sits in a studio in Atlanta, which is great. Does he going to travel onto these different places where they play these tournaments, which is worldwide? I doubt that. And really, the only thing that Barkley talks about in golf is Tiger Woods. He's got a great relationship with Tiger Woods, and Tiger's not part of LIV. So you'd be talking about someone who's not even on that tour. He does a really good job when the quarterbacks get together, like Aaron Rodgers and Brady and Mahomes and Josh Allen.
Well, he knows who they are. Yeah.
He knows who those guys are, and he loves Rodgers. It's his favorite quarterback, although he loves Brady as well. So, yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see, but I'm glad he's back for sure.
Yeah, I could see definitely Turner, giving him a raise. He's worth it to them, certainly. And, he draws audiences. That's the reason why I watch. And it's the lack of show prep. That's kind of why it's really exciting to watch. He obviously has great chemistry with Ernie and Kenny and Shaq. Who knows what his chemistry would have been like with whoever the hell else they pair him with on LIV Golf. That's part of the fun, is his relationship with Shaq and Ernie and Kenny. That's why it works so well. And I don't know who he would be doing stuff with LIV. Yeah, I'm sure the money they offered was really good. Was it a little bit more than what Turner and the endorsements? Possible, but again, it would be more work. It'd be more traveling for him. So I think this job is perfect in terms of how much he has to work, what his traveling situation is. I think it works out really perfectly for him. And basketball, I know he loves golf, but basketball is obviously his biggest passion. You would imagine. Heck, he played it his whole life. So I'm happy he's staying there. I think it's good for the league. It's good for Turner. It's good for Barkley. So that pays off well. And now LIV turns their attention to trying to get Tiger Woods for, I saw $80 million. Is that what they want to get?
800 million.
800. It's missing a zero.
Yeah, 800 million. I mean, because I think they got Dustin Johnson for 125 million, Phil Mickelson for 200 million. So they're all in on Tiger Woods, $800 million. And he said no. And good for Tiger. Again, that royal family is worth $600 billion. And those numbers only go up. I mean, they essentially could just take the interest and just take that money and throw it into golf.
I'm right. I mean, who the hell knows what they really
I mean, I don't know if there's any thing like the IRS in Saudi Arabia that monitors them since they kind of run the country. It's
Right.
like a mob. They do whatever they want. So, yeah, this is just, as you said last week, this is their way to try to take the attention away from all their atrocities. Hey, we've got a golf tour that, has all these great golfers in there. Maybe they decide to buy the NFL for $300 billion. Let's hope not. But, they can do whatever they want. Money does talk, and they have more than anyone. And with them, it's cash. That's the thing. It's not just stock options. You hear all these, who's worth $82 billion. Well, a lot of that's tied up in stock options and all.
Oh, they're all cash. They're as liquid as liquid
comes. This is
comes.
cash. Yeah, they're as liquid as the ocean. So, or the oil wells. So they certainly can throw $10 billion a year at this for 5 years and see where they're at. It's not going to really affect their bottom line because they're only growing at that point. So good for Tiger for saying no. Although, if he says yes to that, I can't hold that against him either. When someone says $700 or $800 million, that's tough to say no to, but good for Tiger.
The shame of it all, Sap, is I think that it would be nice for the PGA to have actually, competition, because they've been basically a monopoly for ever.
Right.
But, unfortunately, it has to come in the form of a Saudi government backed golf league. And I saw Greg Norman had an interview with, who was it, Tucker Carlson? And he was, saying, I don't understand what why people are upset about this. Well, do you really not understand? Because then you're just completely out to lunch. I know this has nothing to do with the NBA, but it's just the fact that people are playing ignorant about why some people are upset about this and trying to make it seem like, oh, they're just upset about competition. Well, no, they're upset that, the Saudi government was the largest backer of 9/11 terrorists. And, now they're playing golf at Donald Trump, our ex-president's golf course. That's not a great look.
No, not at all. And that's why there's been this backlash. But, they're obviously putting some money into it, to say the least. And we'll see what happens going forward. But at least we'll get to enjoy Charles Barkley on TNT. He's phenomenal. That's by far the best pre, post, halftime, whatever show on TV. It's not even close because it has the feel of a radio show, right? It's just like four guys. You've got Ernie as the host. He's the ringmaster. And Kenny Smith is more of the nuts and bolts kind of intellectual guy. And then you got Charles and Shaq, who just give it so much character and so much personality that it just works. It just works. Yeah. Sometimes those things work for no explainable reason, and that's one of them.
You can't teach or practice chemistry.
No, you can't.
So, that's something that happens naturally, and that's what they have on that show. So I'm really glad. Sap, next show, we're going to talk a little bit more about money, specifically some of these franchises that were just named on the top most valuable franchise list. I don't want to spoil it right now, but the most valuable NBA team, I think, will surprise some people.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk a lot about that. But I did have one more question for you before we get out of here. I just saw this report today that the Lakers have already given Darvin Ham the power to bench Russell Westbrook at the end of games. If that happens, you are a resident Lakers guy, Sap. Is it good that they're already making this a story, months before the season starts, that Darvin Ham, go ahead, you can bench Russell Westbrook at the end of games?
No, this is ridiculous. I mean, this would be like, I don't know.
I laughed when I saw the story.
Yeah, this would be like management of the Green Bay Packers saying, we've given Matt LaFleur the authority that at the end of a game on 4th and 5, in the NFC Championship game, that he could go for it rather than kick a field goal to cut an 8-point deficit down to 5. Yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, like, why do you even have to make a story out of that? They're just a mess. We're going to see.
Jeannie Buss's Twitter was hacked.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, she's still trying to figure out, who the greatest Laker is. She called Kobe the greatest Laker. That probably pissed off Magic, and it pissed me off because to me, Kareem's the greatest Laker. But yeah, they're just a mess. But again, when you got LeBron and you got Anthony Davis, if they're engaged and healthy, you make a move or two, you can be right back there, right? I mean, look at Golden State, which is a much better run organization, obviously. But 2 years ago, they had the worst record in the league. The next year, they got to the play-in tournament and got bounced. They didn't even qualify for the playoffs. And then the next year they won the championship. So that can happen in the NBA. If your stars are engaged, healthy, and you tweak the roster, you can still become a contending team, especially when you have high-level talent like LeBron and Anthony Davis.
I just think they need to be a little bit competent. We'll talk plenty about the Lakers, obviously, before the season starts. That headline caught my eye. It's like, it's the beginning of August. They're talking about benching Russell Westbrook at the end of games. Maybe don't do that right now.
No.
They haven't even started any sort of practicing. These guys are still in Cancun right now. I don't know. The Lakers make me laugh. I'm glad currently they're making me laugh because they can also have the capacity to make me cry. So let's hope that it stays that way for me. I know you don't want it to stay that way. So.
No, not at all.
But that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press coverage. Make sure you check out our social medias for updates on the shows and all sorts of opinions and polls. Sap, I saw you were talking about the greatest non-quarterback of all time. You had a poll question up on that, or was that a poll question you answered?
No, a poll question I had up, and Jerry Rice.
I voted for Jim Brown. I agreed with you.
Me too. To me, it'd be Brady is the greatest player of all time. I mean, but again, let's take the quarterbacks out of it. I would go Jim Brown number 2, Jerry Rice number 3, Lawrence Taylor number 4, and Reggie White number 5, the great defensive lineman who played for the Eagles and Packers and ended his career with Carolina before he passed away, I believe, at 40 years old. But those to me are the 5 greatest players ever. But again, if we're going to leave the quarterbacks out, I would go with Jim Brown. I mean, Jim Brown to me is still in the discussion with Brady as the greatest player ever. The man played 9 years, led the league in rushing 8 times. I don't know what more you can say.
Like I started the show with saying, Bill Russell's one of the greatest athletes in the history of this country. Not just basketball players. Same with Jim Brown.
Sure.
Same with Jim Thorpe. You can name a couple more guys. Probably Wilt Chamberlain as well. Honestly,
Wilt Chamberlain as well through the javelin, record distance. Jackie Robinson, baseball was like his 3rd or 4th best sport. He was better in basketball and football. So I mean, these are guys that are just they're legends, icons, freaks, whatever you want to call them. They're almost, like you said, superheroes.
Yeah. Check out Sap's at JohnSap25 and mine is at Jet Stryer. I've been talking more about how upset I am with Warner Brothers and DC Comics recently than sports, but I'll get back into some sports. I know that matters a lot to you, Sap. But yeah, we'll be back next week with a new edition of the podcast. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And we will talk to you later, everybody. Rest in peace to Bill Russell and talk to everybody later. See ya.